Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. And along with the Motor City Madmouth, and if anybody can relate to that name, it's our guest, Eric Hipple. And in the house is Candy Ebling. And Eric, thanks for being on the Sports Exchange. Glad to have you with us.
I'm happy to be with you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Well, I'll tell you what, it's a privilege for me to be able to talk to a person whom I watched play for the Detroit Lions growing up as a kid. So now here I am at 57 years of age talking to a guy that if anybody could have gotten their career out to a better start than you, I would like to find out who, because I'll tell you what, on 10/19/81, Monday Night Football, the Detroit Lions crushed the Chicago Bears 48-17. Do I need to tell you the numbers? No. Do I need to tell everybody else the numbers? Yes. Okay. A day's work consists of 4 touchdown passes, 336 yards, and you ran for 2 touchdowns. And I don't need a math teacher to tell me that you had 6 touchdowns and you're going to throw another one tonight to the audience. So, Eric, let's go out there and reminisce about that game on Monday Night Football. Undoubtedly one of the best debuts probably in Monday Night Football history. The floor's yours, Eric.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. And it was good talking to you down in Florida as well for the Super Bowl down there. But so it was a really interesting way I got to start. First of all, because I was the third team quarterback. It was my second year in the league, and the starting quarterback broke his hand. That was Gary Danielson, broke his hand, early in the season. The backup quarterback went in and played the next 2 games and just stunk it up. And and we were in positions where I think there's a lot of pressure that was on our head coach, Monty Clark, at the time. And I think he had a kind of a dilemma. Okay, what are we going to do? Do we take a shot on this rookie or this third team quarterback that hasn't had a start in the game? And it's Monday Night Football, but I think he was under quite a bit of pressure. And so the offensive coordinator, Bob Schnelker, convinced him that I could do the job. And so I got a phone call up on Monday, not the day of the game, obviously, but the previous Monday. And it was coach, and he said, "Hey, we're going to start you next week on Monday Night Football." So, when you get that news, it's kind of like, oh man, the first thing, I was super excited because my parents are going to get a chance to see this game. My friends in high school get a chance to see this game. My first start, my college teammates going to see this first game, and then of course it dawned on me that everybody is going to get a chance to see this game, and so, so you're kind of like, oh, this is a big deal. And it's also the biggest opportunity you can ever have, and you do not want to have a misstep. And so the game starts at 9 o'clock. Now, the pregame meal, we were told what the first play was going to be. It was going to be a pass play. So then you get that in your meeting, and then and you got a lot of time to think about it before the game actually starts. And so I remember being at the hotel room, sitting in the room by myself, waiting for the time to come to go to the stadium. And almost got down on my knees and just said, just don't let me screw this up. You know what I mean? At least a decent showing. I had a lot of confidence because I worked really, really hard, and I always had the belief I could if I just got a chance. But now that it's there, there's a lot of anxiety. Are you actually going to be able to pull this thing off? And the first play was going to be a pass play. And so during warm-ups, and I'm thinking of all the things, what to look for. We're going to do this, which is that trying. What if they have this coverage? What do I do here? What do I do there? And all those things go through your head. But I got to tell you, when you get underneath the ball, you get underneath the snap, the first snap, you walk up underneath there, your adrenaline is pumping. And as soon as that ball snapped, it was, I think it's happened so fast that I don't even remember looking downfield to the coverage. I just was going to throw the ball. So anyway, and I let it go. It was about a 40-yard pass down the middle of the field, and it was complete. And the fans just lit up. First of all, it was kind of the unknown. I was a third-team quarterback. Our star running back, Billy Sims, was not playing in the game because he had a bad turf toe, so he's not starting. So it's just me, and so all eyes are kind of skeptical. And that first pass lit it up, and things just kind of the game went really fast. But I did a lot of scrambling, ended up running for a couple touchdowns. But during that time, I also threw for a 94-yard touchdown pass in that game, which was kind of an odd thing in itself. Just Chicago Bears at that time, they ran like 6 different defenses. This was prior to their 85 defense that won the Super Bowl with them, when they really honed it down. So they were still experimenting. and they threw all these different fronts, and we're on like the 6-yard line, backed up, and they called a play action pass. It's third down, 3rd and 1. Fake the pass, fake the play action, and our wide receiver, we only had one guy going out. It was a full sellout, and he had man coverage, and he broke across the field, and so he actually ran the wrong route. So it took me a second to find him. Just before he got hit, I let the ball go, and he catches it. I hit the ground, and I hear the crowd roaring. By the time I stand up, he's crossing the end zone down there. It's 94 yards later, down there, and just place is going nuts. I remember standing there on that goal line and watching the other goal line as he crossed it, and the place is going nuts, and it just dawned on me. It just said home. Oh, my gosh, I made it. I can play in this game. I can play in this league. And I think that was the part that all of a sudden, whew, and I just kind of felt free and just kind of absorbed it all. And then, of course, we went on and it was I think it was a 17 game. And so I got to enjoy the end of it because I knew we were going to win.
Well, ironically, Howard Cosell did not broadcast that game because if he did, Eric, I can rest assured his toupee would have fallen off his grill. But meanwhile, you were observed by 3 quarterbacks in the booth. Go ahead and name the 3, please.
So Frank Tarkington, Frank Gifford, Frank Gifford, and Don Meredith were in the booth that night. And here's the best thing about that was, as I've done before, when I've seen a young quarterback all of a sudden break out and has a great game, like a rookie quarterback, and watch him play, it's like I can feel it. I'm kind of reliving it. Oh, this is so cool. All 3 of those dudes were doing that, man. As I'm just having this light-up night, they're talking like crazy. And they're reliving it, and they're having fun with it. And so I remember my dad called me up after the game was over, and he was laughing and joking about the success and the great game and stuff. But he was talking about the guys in the booth, about how they kept saying, "Oh yeah," there's just like, "Oh, that reminds me of it," young. So they're kind of reliving it, which really helped with with the good praise I was getting from the game. They really built me up, and I got to tell you that thing, was such a big breakout and a surprise. I wasn't surprised. I was surprised how everything kind of broke open and kind of worked out. Even the audibles all fitted together and everything else. It was kind of a magical night. But I don't think I slept for like 3 days after that game, man. It was like, adrenaline kicking. And it was just a really nice way to start off.
Well, let me tell you, if you're a Lions fan, and I wasn't a member of the media back then, so I was one of those things called a fan. Of course, nowadays I don't know what it's like to be one because I have a microphone and a computer in front of me. But think about it. The Lions hadn't had a good quarterback since Bobby Lane. You ever heard of him? Okay. And they were begging for you to go ahead and take the throne, thinking maybe, just maybe, okay, we've got one. Unfortunately, you were not the quarterback of the future, but boy, you were definitely a quarterback that provided a spark with a franchise that desperately needed, considering the fact that back in 1979, the franchise was 2-14, and then they drafted Billy Sims, and then they added you, and you came out of nowhere to provide a spark with that organization.
Yeah, it was. I think the other thing with Detroit was I was a scrappy quarterback, and Detroit's kind of a scrappy town. They like their hardworking, toughness, and so they kind of identify by that. And I was the type that scrambled, and I got knocked down. I'd get back up, I wasn't afraid to run, and not just run and run out of bounds. I wasn't afraid to run and run into people. I was kind of reckless like that, which I kind of enjoyed. The reason I got into football to start with was, when I was a kid, to belong to something, right? Because I really enjoyed the team stuff. The second part is I really liked hitting. So,
right.
I always wanted to play linebacker, and I played strong safety, and then when I got into high school, the coach put me at quarterback because I could throw the ball halfway decent. And so I got stuck at quarterback, and that's continued all the way through my college career and then in the pros. And so I didn't mind the hitting, not at all.
The one quarterback I really enjoyed watching for the time he played, I wish he would have gotten a starting job after they won their lone playoff game, was Eric Kramer. Eric Kramer, to me, was a hard-nosed quarterback, and you know what? To me, he was a joy to watch, and he should have been rewarded for winning that playoff game. Unfortunately, Wayne Fonts made the decision at a later date to go back to Rodney Peete because he didn't believe a guy should lose his job to an injury. But that's just one person's opinion. Do you feel though?
No, I'm going to jump on that for a second because that's a really interesting thing. So Eric and I are friends.
Oh yeah, okay.
In fact, I just talked to him a couple days ago, so we still stay in touch and stuff. And when he left, we stayed in touch because I worked for Fox for 5 years from 95,000, and then he went into broadcasting and stuff. But when you go back to that, so after that 81 year, when the breakout I had, Gary Danielson came back the following year, and with his hand, because he had broken his hand, came back, and now he's not hurt anymore. And the coach did the same thing to me. Management wanted to start me, and Coach Marty Clark did not want to start me because you can't lose your job on an injury. And
right.
So he kept putting Gary back in, and so that resolving back and forth was really, really tough. It was tough on Gary. It was tough on me. Because you got these mixed messages that are coming across, and instead of supporting one person saying you're the starter, and then and you're second team waiting for it to happen, they kept trying to play us both and trying to make somebody win it out on the field rather than saying, hey, make this. And so that was really difficult, and that and I considered it hurt my career a little bit, and it certainly damaged Gary's. And then we went to a strike here, and then came back out and all that, and then they finally traded him, and then I had 2 really good years before I started getting beat up and get injured.
Yep.
But Eric Kramer, in the same circumstance, he came into the league, and during one of those years where we were on strike, and he got into the league that way, and then he stuck and stayed. And so I don't think he ever earned the respect he had as a player going up, and so we're going to put our draft choice and keep our guy here and put him in because you can't. So there's a lot of politics, unfortunately, goes along with some of the stuff as well. It's not just the type of player you are, and the player you float to the top, but trying to stay there with a lot of politics is really hard to stay there.
Well, it's funny. I met Eric Super Bowl 39 in Jacksonville, and I did meet him, and we talked for like a couple of minutes, and I told him, on the record between him and I felt the Lions made the biggest mistake on the planet, that they should have gone with him the following year. And as I remember him telling me, he said, well, thank you very much for saying that. Well, you're welcome, but I really mean it. Maybe hopefully down the road, if fate ever has its way, I'd love to get him on the show down the road. But to me, Eric Kramer,
looking back, he got his revenge. He went to Chicago and
he had no.
a few times, Anyway, go ahead.
Well, no, that's okay. No, you're right. He did. If you're going to go ahead and stick it to your old team, just do it in division. It doesn't make any difference. So, but I still have nothing but the utmost respect for Eric, and of course, you know how I feel about you by now. With that said, okay, Eric, let's talk about the highlights of your NFL career.
Well, I consider that certainly the biggest highlight would be that Monday night game because it's just the way the impact made into the league and everything else. But for me, playing against Chicago Bears, I loved playing against Chicago Bears. Forget that Monday night football game. I mean, just playing against them. We played twice a year, of course, because of our division.
Right.
But it was fun playing against them because they had some great athletes. First of all, they were always a challenging defense to play, but they also had some very smart players. Gary Finsick at the time back there, he kind of ran. He was kind of like the captain of their defense, and then Singletary, when he became kind of their captain of the defense, they were smart players. And so going up, and the challenge was like, it wasn't like checkers, it was like chess. You come up underneath the line of scrimmage and you see what they're playing against you, and so some plays are bad, so you audible out of them, and when you audible out, if they see you make your change and stuff, and also they're audibling into their defense and they're changing it back, and so you got to re-audible again. So it was like this game going back and forth, and so it was like a cat and mouse, spy versus spy on the intelligence side. In the meantime, it's a physical game in the trenches, and so I always enjoyed playing against Chicago. It was just fun. One of the other nemesis, of course, was Green Bay. I enjoyed playing Green Bay. I had the highlights of my career, I would say, was in Green Bay, and I believe it was 86. It was 80. I think it was 86. And when you're in a position, when you watch game film, the coaches grade you on performance. In other words, and so it's not necessarily how many passes you threw or touchdowns or those. What they're really grading is your your reads, your mechanics, and so you can go from you can have a 100% game, did nothing wrong, still lose a game, but you actually played a perfect game because you never missed a read, you never missed a pass, you didn't throw behind. I mean, everything was just perfect, right? And so you could still lose but have a perfect game by a coach's measurement of how they grade you.
Right.
And so it doesn't have to do with rating or anything else. It's how they grade you, how you performed your position. And I had a perfect game going, and I mean, it was like one of those days. The sun was shining. It was when you play in Green Bay, it is like one of the greatest places to play because of the tradition. For one, the fans are. This is real football. You know, it's not indoors. It's real football. It's grass. It's just a great place to play. And it was just one of those days. The sun was right. Everything just felt good. It was when you get in the zone. In other words, where you're not really having to think because it comes automatic, and you're able to consciously kind of sit on top and watch and say, "This is so cool." And you notice the little things. You know, if things they just work, and you're right in that zone. And things just like so smooth. And I was in there, man. And I was like, so passes were happening, and then we got into the halftime, just before half, and we're ahead. And I thought, you know what? I could sit on the ball, but just go into halftime. We got the lead. But I thought, let's just take a shot at this thing. So in the huddle, I told my receiver, I said, "Hey, listen, there's still the ball deep, and if we get pass interference, great. It'll be fantastic down there. Let's we can kick a field goal then. And so I set him down deep, and I went back and I threw the ball down, and it got intercepted. And I came over to the sideline, and my offensive coordinator punched me.
Really?
Yeah, and he hits me, and I go, "What was that for?" And he goes, "Well, dang it, you had a perfect game going. What'd you throw the interception for?" And I'm thinking, I'm going, well, because if we get a pass interference, we kick a field goal. I'm just trying to get points. And yet, I didn't. So I don't think of along the terms of trying to perfect my game. It was about trying to win, and I just thought it was such an odd thing, to from a coaching perspective, you got a perfect game going. Why would you do that? And I'm thinking, I like to win games, man. But it was just really interesting. But it was one of those beautiful days. We came back out and we ended up winning the game, and things was just really well. I just enjoyed playing Green Bay a lot as well. Always good hard fight games.
Let me tell you, I've covered games at Lambeau, and I've even covered them at Milwaukee County Stadium. I can tell you right now what I think of Milwaukee County Stadium. I couldn't stand working there because it just, to me, it did nothing for me. On the other hand, you're right. Lambeau Field is a shrine. Everybody should put it on their bucket list as a place to watch a game. And to me, when you go there, what's that?
The seats are terrible.
Well, they weren't so bad for me when I was in the press box, but you can't judge what I'm doing versus where you're at.
What they put up with as a fan, because this goes back, right?
Right.
I know they've done a lot of reconditioning and building it up and stuff, but still, they were bench seats. It was like playing at a college game with bench seats. They weren't seats where you have a back to them.
Right.
They were bench seats, and they jam everybody in there, which made it kind of cool, because it's just a wall of people. But from a fan point of view, it's not the most comfortable. But from a player standpoint of view, it is awesome.
Yeah, and from a media guy, it's so awesome. So since we're talking about the Green Bay battles, okay, you have a Packers fan sitting right here. She's flexing her muscles, showing how macho she is, and now she wants to talk to you about the Packers battles from a Wisconsin point of view. The floor is yours with her on this one, Eric, before we get to a few other football-related questions and then on to the nonprofits.
Okay.
So, Eric, did you ever play in County Stadium?
In which one?
In Milwaukee County Stadium.
I did. Oh, gosh. Were they lining people up on both sides?
Yes.
Yeah. In fact, I remember so both teams are on the same sideline, which is really, really strange, And so, yeah, I did play there when they used to play down there. And I remember we were playing, and let me think of the quarterback. Magic. Okay, so he was quarterback at the time when we're playing against them down there, and I remember walking from our sideline, and I crossed their line and walked over there, and I was standing over there trying to get any information I can, and ended up having a conversation with him. It was just Michalski was, if you remember it correctly, and so it was just a strange a thing, the way it was just set up, and so you're both on the same side. So it was a strange place to play.
It's a strange place to cover a game too. Go ahead, Candy.
I mean, that was originally a baseball stadium. So it was really made for baseball.
It was really odd play. I don't think. I don't. Are there any stadiums there's no stadiums now that are dual? I don't.
Well, actually, the last one, Eric, was Oakland. So now the
Okay,
Raiders have
yeah.
moved out of there. But yeah, they're
Well,
definitely a dying
played,
breed.
I know when I broke my ankle against Frisco, that was on the. It was they was still baseball stadium there as well.
Yeah, it was Candlestick Park.
Yeah, Candlestick Park. Yeah, when Charles Haley hit me and I slid down my leg and it snapped my ankle, and my foot went on backwards. And in fact, I remember that happened. Charles Haley came off the end and hit me, and the snap. I heard it snap, but I didn't feel any pain because obviously my body was in shock. But I remember laying there, and then of course, after they put me up, they put me in kind of the air casting and get me off the field. We go in the locker room, and the pain still hasn't set in yet because it's still in shock. And they pulled all that stuff off me and tried to set it. And I had scrapes on the inside of my ankle because that's how it snapped and laid on the ground. And they had to scrape the dirt out of it from the infield. So it was like a slit or something, But yeah, so that was there, and I think playing down I think LA at the time, the Rams. I think they weren't that. Anaheim. I think.
Right. Yeah. Right. At Angel Stadium.
So those are always difficult because the difference of first of all, they didn't have the proper crown like you'd want to have in a regular football field, and so you have to throw the ball a little bit different because the way the ball breaks, downhill off of a normal crown. And so there's a lot of differences about that, but that's one thing. I'm happy that they don't have those anymore because playing on a football field is the way it should be played. It's also a much better experience for the fans as well.
Candy, do you have any other Packers questions you want to hit, Eric? This is your opportunity to do it. We got to give her due, Eric.
Eric, was there any defensive player that you really didn't want to see on the field against you that was a Packer?
You're going to have to help me with the names here because I can't think of his name off the top of my head. Strong safety.
Wasn't Leroy?
What was it?
Not Leroy Butler, was it?
No, but he wasn't any fun either. But I'm trying to think. Oh my gosh!
That's all right.
She's killing me. I'm sorry, I can't think of his name right now. But I got to tell you,
she's researching it, so you can. I'll just go ahead while we have her researching it. Charles Haley inflicted a lot of pain on everybody, so join the club.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you the Green Bay. One of the that really hurt me. It was the season where we went ahead and went off and went to the playoffs, and we lost against San Francisco, where Ed Murray missed the 52-yard field goal, which everybody remembers him missing, and holding him accountable for the loss. We could have gone on because Francisco went ahead and went on and won the Super Bowl that year.
Wasn't that when Monty Clark prayed that he would make it?
Yeah. But there's some backstory to that, which was the last game of the season, our regular season. We're playing Green Bay. And I threw a touchdown pass, and I'm standing there after I threw the ball. He caught it in the end zone, and strong safety for Green Bay came over and hit me, and blew my knee out. And so I didn't get a chance to play in the playoff game. Danielson ended up starting that game, and everybody really hits hard on Green Bay. On Eddie Murray for missing that field goal, but Gary threw 5 interceptions in that game. And had I been able to play in that game, Vince, we would have won. We probably had a chance. We had a really strong team. Had a chance to go all the way to the Super Bowl because Frisco ended up going to the Super Bowl that year and winning. So anyway, thanks Green Bay.
It could be Reggie White.
No, Reggie White, by the way, actually did the league. Did players a huge. He became a leader, for rights and stuff for players, and actually changed the face of how the league is, how the money is shared today. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was a big piece of that. Yeah.
I will.
If I could think of I can't think of his name.
Well, you might come up with it later. Don't worry about it. I'm not gonna. Yeah. We'll go to some other.
I think I tried to block him out.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I'm going to give you opportunities to come up with it, so I'm going to go on to 3 more football questions, and we'll go to nonprofits. And if you're like me, okay, you would think that blank all of a sudden will get it before we go off the air. Otherwise, people will have to interact with us.
Yeah.
So, all right, so let's go ahead and talk about what it would be like playing in today's NFL. There's less hand checking and more protection of the quarterback, and I know you took a beating back there.
And I'm going to give you a little bit of evolution in how, this is my opinion, but I think it's of how things got to the passing games and stuff the way they are. the '85 Bears, that defense they had, the 46th defense,
Right.
Changed the face of football and how offenses work and everything else. It was so dominant, and they brought everybody in, but you could not tell if it was a blitz, if it was a drop out to a zone, and if it was a blitz, there's no way you can block it. You cannot protect it, and so that means you're throwing breakoffs every play, and you can't win by doing that. And so, had we find a way, and so that was the year they went to the Super Bowl. The following year, we came back out, and since we played them twice, we had to figure out something. So we found out that you can spread out your offense, spread it out, and they have to show what they're doing. So they'd have to spread everybody out. I can see if it's man, I can see if they can blitz, I can see if it's going to be a zone, what are they going to do? And that gave an opportunity for you to actually run an offense against it. It was shortly after that the Jets started running the defense. Rams ran that defense. Almost every team had a type of that 46 defense they put, and so teams had to adjust to it. And you started seeing teams have receivers and spread everything out on first down so they could play against that defense. And that was the beginning of the spread offenses. They had nickel backs on third down, but this was the beginning of the true spread offenses of how the games are changing. Today, it is such an offensive advantage against the defense, and primarily because of the quarterback position. Yes, the defensive backs have a disadvantage. Receivers have a big advantage, but it's really the quarterback has so much advantage because before he even takes a snap, he is not under any pressure at all because he knows he can throw the ball away. And if I know I can throw the ball away, what do I have to lose? I can run a play every down, and I do not have to force it downfield and throw it downfield. So my chance of throwing an interception goes way down because I can throw the ball away. I don't have to take a sack, so I don't have a negative play if they've got a good pass rush. I can throw the ball away. And you can't hit me in the head. You can't hit me after throw. And so there really is no duress on the quarterback anymore. The only pressure that he's got, basically, really is accuracy and running the offense. And if you've been in a position for a long period of time and you've got that skill set, it's really hard to upset a quarterback who's been around for a while. And so you have the guys like, the guys that are 40 years old that are playing in the Super Bowl or playing in the playoffs to go to a Super Bowl. Because of that longevity, because once you know a system and you feel comfortable and you can make reads, it's really hard to stop you. And so I think it really puts the defense at a disadvantage unless you've got a massive pass rusher and really good corners that can man up on somebody, and then that way at least takes some of the time away. But other than that, it's really hard. The advantage is really with the offense, and that's a big difference to me between what was and what is on how the whole thing's run.
All right, so let's have a little bit of fun with this, okay? And I know you'll get a kick out of what I'm about to ask you. We know you threw for 55 touchdowns in your career. Of course, it didn't hurt to get 4 on one night, but 55 nonetheless what you ended up with, and 10,711 yards. So let's take those numbers back then, and what do you think they would translate into 2020 numbers?
Well, let's see. First of all, so you could probably say we're going to throw the ball about 3 times as much as you did, at least probably about 3 times more than you were throwing back then. At least doubled. Okay, so you can double that right off the bat. Second of all, since it's more of a passing game, you've got wide receivers that are more what's the word I want to use? Are more used to catching the ball more often, but also running after they catch the ball and getting. So there's a huge advantage there as well. And so those numbers go up. You know what I mean? The interceptions go down and the numbers go up. And longevity as far as injury goes, part of the game for quarterbacks, and one of the reasons why they started changing rules, in the late 80s was because of one season when you got, I think there's like 5 starting quarterbacks that were basically put out of commission.
Right.
The TV ratings go way down when that happens, and so we can't have that happen. And so, so guys started to slide, and you can't get hit, you can't touch, and so. And now today, it's really obvious, so the injuries on quarterbacks are a lot less.
So give me an idea what your numbers would be. Let's not play dodgeball here. I gave you the
times 3, and then take out the 2 strike years because
okay.
One was minimized and the other one was short.
Okay, that's
so
true.
You take those 2 years out. Yeah.
All right.
And so you run those, and so you take so that would another 2 years. Let's see, I was on injury reserve for a year and a half.
Right.
So Just multiplying by 3. That's the best way to do it.
All right, so 55 times 3 is 165, I think. All right, well, that's close enough. I'm doing off the top of my head. I don't have the ability to use the calculator here.
Right.
That's okay.
To be honest with you, it's really hard to tell because the game was so much different. The way you ran on offense was completely different. The use of your running backs, because you had to have a run game. Because if you threw the ball, one out of there's 3 things that can happen, and only one of them was good. The other 2 were bad. And so today it's you throw the ball 3 things can happen, and all 3 of them are good. So,
all right, so Candy did the math for us. Since I don't have access to a calculator, it's 165. So Candy, do the math from 10,711 and times that by 3, and we're going to have a little bit of fun with Eric so that we can give you the 20. Yeah, 10,711 yards times 3. All right, hold on, Eric. We're gonna come up with your 2020 numbers, okay?
32,133.
32,133. There you go, Eric. We just bumped you up a few notches here, okay?
So, I appreciate that.
No problem. Anytime, pal. All right, we got 2 more football questions, and then you and Candy are gonna have a little bit of talk about your nonprofits. How's that sound? Okay.
That sounds great.
All right, well, let's talk about, give me your thoughts about Matt Stafford. I love Matt Stafford. Anybody that would think that they should trade him definitely needs their head examined. But, Matt Stafford's a fine quarterback. But that's my opinion. What's yours?
I like Matt Stafford as well. I like him for a couple different reasons. One is he's a competitor. He fights, and he'll get hit, he'll get back up, he'll shrug it off like it never happened. He is not, he doesn't give up. His attitude's always positive. He fights at the end, to make those comebacks. He does well under pressure. The first part of his career, he was getting knocked for, by naysayers about his arm. He throws off balance. He throws high line. He doesn't throw properly and everything else. And today they look at that same and just say, "Oh my gosh, look, he can throw off his back foot. He can throw sideways. He can throw." In fact, they're giving the guys that have that ability to throw like that a lot of kudos. Mahomes being one of them.
Right.
Brett Favre was like that. Aaron Rodgers, guys that can throw the ball sidearm and get the ball out and stuff like that. So I think they've done the reversal on him, but he's really good at it. I mean, he's a competitor, and that's what I like about him.
Okay. All right. Now let's talk about the potential 17-game schedule that the NFL owners want. Players are resisting, but I have a feeling, according to DeMaurice Smith, the president of the union, he seems to think this deal is going to get done. What are your thoughts about the potential 17-game schedule? You for it or against it?
I think I'd be for it, and the reason I say that is they played the preseason games and they're non-games. They're dumb, so we're extending it anyway. That's what I think, and so let's make it a game that counts as part of the season. The hitting rules they have as far as contact during practice is gone down significantly. That the rules, you can only have so many pad days out of the whole year, and so when you go to training camp today, there are no 2 practices a day hitting, and we had about 6 weeks of that. Right. And that's been thrown out. And so they have, pads and shells, very minimal. And so they're not doing hitting in practice per se. They're saving it for the games. And so adding a game, the biggest beef against having 17 games was because the additional wear and tear on the body. But they're taking a lot of the wear and tear away from training camp. And so I think the body can handle it.
Yeah, well, not only that. 1979, Gary Danielson got injured during the last preseason, and he was out for the year. I know the Lions went deep into the I believe they had Joe Reed and then Jeff Connell, a 9th-round pick out of Delaware, took over before you came on board later on after that. So I agree with you. And not only that, it's more money in the players' pockets as well instead of a meaningless preseason game. What do they pay for during preseason? I've always wondered about that.
Well, the current rates, I'm not really sure. I got to go back and look, but it's not like what you think. I can tell you this. Okay, so for the preseason games, we get paid $500 a week. Basically, is what we got paid during training camp, and then so you'd play a preseason game, and it's just part of, it's part of practice, really.
Right.
You really didn't get paid for it. So I don't know if it was like, I forget what it was, or some minimal thing, I don't know, whatever it was. But you really didn't get started getting paid until the season started, because that's when your contract kicked in.
Right.
And so it's not worth it for preseason games, really, to play in my count. You need maybe 2 for, to actually hit and find out, to get used to hitting during game and get game speed up. But you don't need 4. It used to be you bring, 140 guys into camp, and, 45 would make the team. And so you'd have that 100 guys, extra guys in there during training camp. You had to do a lot of hitting to find out who's going to stay, who's not going to go. So you actually made the team through attrition in many cases, right? And today they don't do that. They already kind of have a pretty good idea of who's going to be on the team and who's not going to be on the team by the way they draft, by the way they pick, the way they do things, and the money is such that it kind of locks them into certain people they are going to be playing, regardless of what So those battles for position are much smaller now than they used to be, in training camp and stuff.
Well, years ago they used to have 6, and they came down to 4. But that's fine. All right. Well, let's turn our attention over to your nonprofits. Candy has a bunch of questions that she wants to go to, and then when we're done with this segment, you're going to provide all the necessary contact information to our listeners and whatever you want to put out there. Eric, Candy, the floor is yours with Eric Hipple.
So, Eric, let's transition from football to after football. So tell me a little bit about that transition and about these nonprofits that are near and dear to your heart.
Well, the first thing, I've been involved in mental health for about 18 years now, and I'd actually say it started, my journey started back, she could all the way back, you forget about family history and stuff, but when you left the game of football, I'll even tie it into, someone being ostracized out of a group, because nobody leaves the game. There's a few now that will, but nobody left the time that would leave the game because they wanted to. They were either cut, injured, or were forced to leave. And by that means everything that you had, is now gone. Your support system's gone. Your doctors are gone. Your teammates are gone. So there's no locker room. You can't even go back in, to work out or anything else. You can't go through those doors, right? You now become an outside person. And so ostracizing somebody, kicking them out is very painful. Mm-hmm. In fact, on research studies, it shows up at the same place that physical pain shows up, is to be ignored and to be removed and to be, pushed out. And so that's what's one thing. The other piece of it is, for, like in my case, I started playing football when I was 9 years old, and I was cut when I was 32 years old. And so from that whole time, from 9 years old to 32 years old, I wore a uniform every fall. That was my identity of a quarterback. So about the year, I've got a uniform on. And so that, all of a sudden, that loss of identity of not knowing exactly who you are, and now you're on the outside of the bubble and trying to, I got my degree in college, but now the people I'm competing against have been in the job world for 10 years. And so you've got a 10-year gap that you've got to try and catch up on. And so that's a very difficult thing. So transition is very tough. Mm-hmm. And what I started, picking up on is not only was our guys were going through on these transitional issues and showing up with, you could call it behavioral health issues, depression. I think at one point in time we did a survey and found about 15% of our guys were moderately to severely depressed, after they left the game at some point in time. And a lot of it was due to that transitional piece. The other thing that happens is, the human need to belong is so strong. I mean, we all have a need to belong, right? Right. And so when you remove that away from somebody, the groups that they belong to, trying to find, another group to belong to, sometimes gets people in trouble. It also sometimes, leads to people making bad decisions financially, because they're making it with their emotions of trying to belong to something rather than the logical sense of how the money should be, used, mm-hmm. For good logic, strategy. And so all that stuff is caught into that transitional piece. And so I really started watching it and started to learn more. And then I actually went and did some training and worked, for 11 years at the University of Michigan Depression Center. And while I was doing that, started trying to build programs up. One of things I did suicide prevention. I was picked up by the Navy to go do workshops for with a team that would go to these different bases and do workshops, and my new part was suicide prevention. And I started noticing very similar aspects for the military. They're training all the time. They wear a uniform. They have a hierarchy command. They're mission oriented, very much like what happens with football players. And so when they left the game, when they left the service, that uniform comes off, or they were injured and removed. Very similar circumstances in that transition. And so I started matching up and trying to work with those groups. And from that, we started the After the Impact Fund. After the Impact Fund was just like it says. It's after the impact of transition. It's after the impact of injury. It's after the impact of blast wave or whatever it might be, post-traumatic stress. But it's after the impact. And so what do you do about that? And that was that transitional piece. And so After the Impact Fund reaches out to and tries to provide funds for treatment for both veterans and for former players. Former players mostly have funding today because of the new funding sources that the NFL pretty much has. But so our job is to go out and actually work with our veterans and try and help them out. And so that's the After the Impact Fund. Along those lines, can I just keep on going?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
Floor is yours.
I guarantee I won't lose my voice over this show. Keep it going, Eric.
So along those lines is one of the things that we built a program tied into the After the Impact Fund was working with, as we worked with these guys, we would get guys in that would come in on behavioral issues, but maybe they were identifying with, brain concussions or something like that. And so some of these guys, they had a really hard time getting them well. Some of them were still suicidal after a month, and what's going on here, and why can't we get them better? And I was asked by a neurologist, his name's Dr. Benson, he said, well, why don't you have them tested for the endocrine system? And I had no idea what he was talking about. And so I was already been doing some work with him, so we took him over to an endocrinologist, and it's called a STIM test, and test their hormones. And these guys, I found out they had like zero growth hormone, zero testosterone. And as we age, it goes down, but we should never be at zero. Okay. And you got a guy who's 35 years old and 40 who has no testosterone and no growth hormone being produced. What is that? And it's called hypopituitarism. It's pituitary dysfunction due to TBI induced, so traumatic brain injury induced. And I started noticing a lot of our guys, so we started treating them, and their quality of life came back amazingly, and they felt whole again. And so we're now doing a research project. I say we, I just, I don't work for them. I kind of more or less represent them, and as I do other foundations. And we're doing it for former football players. The research just started about a month ago. And so if anybody's listening, it's a former player, feel free to, contact. But it's Center for Neurological Studies. So CNS, Center for Neurological Studies. And we're doing that research right now for former players. Mm. And the hope is, we'll, after the testing and do some of the treatment, we'll be able to actually bring it and publish the papers and saying this is a real thing.
No need to worry about if anybody's listening, man. This is a national broadcast, Eric. So
fantastic.
So you don't have to worry about that. If anytime you get iHeartRadio and the rest of our people out there, I guarantee your voice will be heard when I get done with it. I'll make Don King look like a bad promoter.
Yeah. So, well, we need that because I need former players to come forward, and if nothing else, get tested, and so they can reach out to Center for Neurological Studies.org. So that's CNS. We can get that later. But anyways, let's turn to
continue on. You have other stuff you want to get to.
So, so along that aspect of it, we were having a lot of guys come to us to say, I've got CTE, but some of these guys, I was looking at and we were trying to assess. A lot of them had, mental health issues going on too, maybe exacerbated by the transition. But more work in that area of mental health. And for those who don't know, my main thrust involved in mental health was I lost a son to suicide.
Wow.
And he was 15 years old, and he had never hit his head. He played basketball, and as a freshman in high school, he took his life. And so that threw me into the mental health world of trying to get answers. And so I was really, been involved and invested in this. And in fact, one of the other programs that I work with and try and promote and trying to get into schools, they're in about 130 schools here in Michigan, from K all the way from K to K-12, and it's called Be Nice, which that sounds really simple, doesn't it? Be nice.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that mean? But the nice part stands for notice, invite, challenge, and empower. So it's about recognizing and being using the right terminology, getting rid of stigma, but not only that, empowering yourself to help someone else or to help yourself to ask the right questions. And so there's a large level of there. It's all student driven, but there's a large level of there of a peer-to-peer outreach that's really effective. And the hardest thing about right now, there really isn't stigma in high schools. There really isn't stigma, for people entering into college anymore. They know what mental health is, or mental illnesses are. They know what those things are. They talk about them. The stigma becomes trying to get help, because it's so difficult to get help. There's such a lack of resources, and waiting, 3 months to get an appointment with a psychiatrist or a really good therapist in these systems and stuff. So that's where the stigma is. We need to get more resources out there. But anyway, so that program though is one that's near to my heart. It's Mental Health Foundation of Western Michigan. But we're growing the program, and it's, like I said, it's called BeNice.org. And so since that's school driven, that was part of my passion as well.
Well, we have a regular guest there named Michael Keller, who I don't know if you've ever heard of Michael Keller, but he lives in Michigan, upstate Michigan, near Cadillac. And he told me that he's already got signs of CTE symptoms. So, I can appreciate when I hear CTE.
Yeah.
It's one thing to hear it. It's another know when you have people that it affects you in a more direct way. If you follow where I'm coming from.
Well, one of the things about mental health in itself, and I say that because it has a lot to do with awareness, understanding that when things do happen, it can have an effect. Stress like that, it can have an effect on you. The genetics of having, a predisposition for anxiety, for example, or even people who are more susceptible to concussion. And then you take that thing and you throw a really stressful thing like a transition into it. It can actually exacerbate any injuries that you had, including brain injury. It can exacerbate them, and it makes it harder to heal. In fact,
Right.
Post-concussive syndrome can lock in for a longer period of time, and it can kind of start that way down. And the pituitary function of not being able to produce, growth hormone and testosterone, and to help clean up, some of the cell death that goes on inside of a brain when it gets damaged, also, can lead and complicate things as far as what we're talking about is CTE down the road. And so trying to stave that off in a longer period of time. There's a lot of things that are, high omega-3s and stuff that you can take like that to try and push that off a little bit. But really the behavioral health part of, no matter what's going on, trying to understand that, the sense of purpose, the sense of well-being that a person has, and realizing that when things do happen, what they do about it is the important piece, right? Because one thing that's common, we're all different, with different backgrounds, different genetics, and different but there's a lot of similarities too, and that has to do with feelings, and if you say you're sad, I understand what that is because I've been sad. If you say you're happy, I understand what that is because I've been happy, right? And so communicating through those modes and trying to be a source for somebody, because one of the most devastating thing a person can go through when they're going through any of this, which is the mental health issues or it gets transitional issues, is that isolation and that burdensome feeling that you feel to the rest of society. I feel like I'm just in the way all the time. I feel like a failure. I feel like a loser. My self-worth is so far down. And so I will isolate. I won't communicate. I won't connect. And I feel like I'm the only one going through something.
Right.
When somebody's doing that, right, having another person on the other side just to connect with presents hope. And it's the hopelessness that causes, suicides. It's hopelessness that causes people to isolate, substance use. And I mean, that's not the only thing. But it's part of it, trying to change the way that you feel and the way you behave. And so we can be a really good, I don't even want to use the word mentor, but a peer, somebody who listens, somebody can support. It's one of the reasons why the Detroit Lions have, 5 years ago, we put in a peer-to-peer outreach group. There's 8 of us, so we brought in a trainer. We trained on outreach, trained on mental health, and there's 8 of us that do outreach for the Detroit Lions for our alumni, and it's done really, really well, and it's been a really rewarding experience, and it's starting to get some of the attention from some of the other teams as far as what does that look like, and we've actually saved lives, maybe a couple people that of our alumni. We got some guys that helped that needed it, and so it's really a cool thing. This peer-to-peer outreach is really, really neat. That's another piece that of connection.
Well, all I can tell you is when I hooked up with you down in Miami, and then you went on Rudy Reyes' show, and it was neat just to see you again after a little while since I've relocated and traded the North for the Southern exposure. Is I knew you had a good story, and I'm glad that you got it out there for a few minutes with him. But in my mind, you're more of an inspiration to me to be able to come forth and talk about it at the levels that you're doing. Because I don't judge a guy what he does solely on the field, but what has he done off the field to try to make, an impact on somebody else's lives? And I can tell you right now, I'm just going to throw a few names, and one day, when you come on again, we can talk about other players that are perhaps going through. But a few that stand out in my mind are Jim McMahon, formerly of the Bears,
Yes.
and Mike Animley's story as well publicized too. Again, we'll get into that down the road, and of course, you alluded to Eric Kramer. But for me, for anybody out there that wants an inspiring story, I encourage you to go to www.southfloridatribune.com. And we have Eric Hipple's story up there, and hopefully if you get a chance down the road and you feel free to do it, you're welcome to send us more material so we can get it out there for people to read it, because I don't think you can ever have enough exposure to what you're talking about. I think that as a fan, you know one thing, but you have to know what the player goes through, not only what they've done in the locker room, all the numerous practices in the games, but over an accumulation of a period of time. And, again, Junior Seau, who would have thought that he would have passed away the way he did? I'm not going to get into many more names, but you know where I'm going with this, right, Eric?
I do, and it's and today there seems to be an acceleration of suicidal behavior, and again, I would just do an outreach thought here, which is there's enough negative things in the world, let's focus on the positive. Let's give a smile to somebody. Let's look somebody in the eye and say hello to them, and just try and be on the bright side and be a support system to somebody, and let's help each other. It's a great thing.
Okay. Are there any other things you want to talk about this subject, or would you like to give our listeners a way to contact you? So that they can hopefully do what they can to spread the word or whatever. The floor is yours in terms of what you want to put out there in terms of contact information. Go ahead, Eric. I'm throwing you the pass this time, and you're the wide receiver.
Well, I would say I'd rather throw it, but then again, I have.
Well, you've thrown enough passes. I could throw one at you, man.
So here's the thought. Here's the thing. Yes, there's places for anybody who's looking at depressive and maybe looking for a way for somebody else. This is not my site, but I spent 11 years there, University of Michigan. They have a great site. It's called the depressiontoolkit.org. So it's depressiontoolkit.org. It's the University of Michigan's Depression Center. And it's got a lot of great information on it for former players, or for we also see. They see, I should say, Dr. Benson and Center for Neurological Studies sees not only car accident patients with head injury, but also across the board, all sports, and we've helped a lot of people just that aren't athletes along the way. But we do have this study going that will help everybody, because it's recognizing this as an injury point, which is the hypopituitarism or TBI-induced pituitary dysfunction. And so that's CNS, Center for Neurological Study. So Center for Neurological Study.org, .com, I think it is. I got me confused.
Right.
And then, of course, BMIS.org. It's a school presentation. More than presentation, it's a cultural change driven by students, and that's a fantastic site. It's called benice.org. So Nice. NICE stands for Notice, Invite, Challenge, and Empower. And then, of course, the after the Impact Fund, doing a lot of great work, and we help people, get to treatment, whether addiction treatment or whether behavioral issues or mental health treatment. And we work a lot with vets, but also former players as well. And we're starting into the corporate world as well. So again, that's after the Impact Fund. And of course, for me, if anyone is interested in having me speak, they can contact me through EricHippleSpeaks.com. So that's EricHippleSpeaks.com.
So you want to end the show on a fun note? Okay. Remember Bob Reynolds, the announcer, right? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, I remember Bob real well. So, all right, I'm going to give you a little bit of play-by-play here. So I'm the quarterback and you're the wide receiver. So can you handle it?
I got it.
All right. The Motor City Man-Mouth is back to pass. He fires downfield. He's got Eric Hipple. Hipple at the 50, the 40, the 30, the 20, the 10. Touchdown. Motor City Man-Mouth to Eric Hipple. Bingo. What do you think, Eric?
Look at this dance I'm doing, baby.
Oh, yeah. Can you do it as good as Billy White Shoes Johnson? I don't know.
There you go, man. That's one thing I do like today. They're getting back into the dancing thing in the end zone. A lot of people don't like that. But I'm saying, man, if you score a touchdown, hey, go at it.
Hey, listen, I never threw a touchdown pass over in the NFL. Since I have a quarterback on the other end of this microphone there, I get to be quarterback. You get to be wide receiver. After all, nobody could have started out their debut better than you did on Monday Night Football, 10-19-1981. So what can I tell you, Eric? It's been such a blast having you on the program. And, God, you got to let me feel like I threw a touchdown in the NFL. And this is as close as I'm going to get to it because I'm so busted up. I would never see the field, let alone the artificial surface that stands out there. So,
your imaginary quarterback and my imaginary actually catching a touchdown pass, we're both in the same league. So.
Oh, yeah, we are. We're in a league of our own, man. If I'm using up that analogy, so be it. I'm guilty as charged. But you know what, Eric? I tell you what, it's been I've had a lot of fun with this opportunity to go out there and get your cause out there. And you've been a super guest and a good friend. So I'm glad that we were able to do this, much less the fact that we have a Green Bay Packers girl sitting across the table from us.
That's okay. I've got Wisconsin family over there, so I have to be a Packer fan, every once in a while. But anyway.
Well, I do too, actually, now that you mention that, because you know what? I spend more time with my Wisconsin family than my own family in Detroit. Nothing against them per se, but, I definitely realize that, it's pretty neat. And I did send a group text before we went on the air to a lot of our family members that Candy was talking to a former Detroit Lions quarterback, and believe me, they're going to get a kick out of this. I don't know whether they're going to lose their hearing after my play-by-play and my imaginary catch, but you know what? Who cares? Do you?
Hey, no, enjoyed, man. Hey, thank you very much for the time, and allow me to some of this work that I feel passionate about. I really appreciate it.
Well, you know what, Eric? It's been an absolute pleasure talking to a guy that I watched play the game. And now it's just nice to be able to have an opportunity to share your story with a lot of people. So Eric Hipple, folks, is on the South Florida Tribune Broadcasting Network. We're here live on the Sports Exchange. So, Eric, I want to thank you again, and we'll definitely be in touch. Okay? Hope you enjoyed your time on the program, Eric.
Certainly did. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Me too.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
Bye-bye.
Bye.